And right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals. One that would create a market of 2 billion people, accounting for almost a quarter of global GDP. And crucially, that would provide a first-mover advantage for Europe with one of the world's fastest-growing and most dynamic continents. Europe wants to do business with the growth centers of today and the economic powerhouses of this century, from Latin America to the Indo-Pacific and far beyond. Europe will always.
For nearly 2 decades, India and the European Union talked trade without urgency. Negotiations dragged on, stalled and restarted. But now something has clearly shifted. The India-EU trade talks are closer than to conclusion than even before. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen set the tone. She said both sides were on the cusp of a historic agreement. Some, she said, are already calling it the mother of all deals. That phrase reflects not just ambition, but scale, timing, and geopolitics.
And right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals. One that would create a market of 2 billion people, accounting for almost a quarter of global GDP. And crucially, that would provide a first-mover advantage for Europe with one of the world's fastest-growing and most dynamic continents. Europe wants to do business with the growth centers of today and the economic powerhouses of this century, from Latin America to the Indo-Pacific and far beyond. Europe will always choose the world, and the world is ready to choose Europe.
The European Union is already India's largest trading partner in goods. But this proposed free trade agreement goes far beyond cutting tariffs. It aims to create predictable rules for trade in goods and services, investments, digital standards, emerging technologies, and supply chains. For India, this matters more than ever as trade friction with the United States continue to rise. With the India-EU summit scheduled for January 27, negotiators are racing to close the final gaps. What makes this deal exceptional is its sheer size. Together, India and the EU represents nearly 2 billion people and close to a quarter of global GDP. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has described it as the most consequential trade pact India has ever negotiated with a developed bloc. The deal's scope is just as important as its scale. It covers services, technology flows, regulatory cooperation, digital trade, and investment protection. At a time when global supply chains are being redrawn, this agreement could place India at the heart of new manufacturing and trade networks. The first attempt at an India-EU trade pact began in 2007 but collapsed by 2013. Differences over tariffs, intellectual property, data protection, labor norms, and environmental standards proved too wide. For years, the talks lay dormant. Now that changed in 2022. The pandemic exposed supply chains vulnerabilities. Global uncertainty increased. Both sides returned to the table with stronger political backing. Parallel talks under the India-EU Trade and Technology Council helped break deadlocks, especially on digital and tech-related issues. Now, according to reports, 20 of the 24 negotiating chapters are already closed. Commerce Secretary Rajesh Agarwal has said India is very close to the finish line. Now, what remains now are the toughest political decisions. India's trade tensions with the United States form an important backdrop. Disputes over agriculture, tariffs, and energy ties have complicated progress. India has resisted pressure to open sensitive farm sectors. tariff threats linked to Iran-related trade have unsettled exporters. In contrast, the EU offers India a more stable rules-based partner. Trade numbers underline this logic. Goods trade between India and the EU crossed 120 billion euros in 2024. Services trade is estimated at around 60 billion euros, led by IT and digital services. For India, the EU provides scale, predictability, and balance in an increasingly protectionist world. The biggest gains for India would come in labor-intensive sectors. Textiles, garments, leather, and marine products currently face EU tariffs of up to 12%. Lower duties would sharply boost competitiveness. Pharmaceuticals and chemicals would benefit from smoother regulatory pathways, helping Indian generics and especially chemicals expand further in Europe. India has also held firm on agriculture and dairy. Sensitive sectors remain protected, consistent with New Delhi's long-standing red lines. However, one unresolved issue is the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism. The carbon levy could raise costs for Indian steel, aluminium, and cement exports. India is pushing for traditional relief, but clarity is still awaited. Mobility for skilled professionals remain another priority. While politically sensitive in Europe, improved access would benefit India's IT, engineering, and professional services sectors significantly. From the EU's perspective, the deal helps reduce overdependence on China and deepens engagement with a fast-growing market. European exporters want better access for wines, spirits, automobiles, machinery, medical devices, and high-end manufacturing. Tariff reductions here could reshape India's consumer and industrial markets. Beyond trade, the agreement is expected to unlock more European investment in green energy, digital infrastructure, and advanced manufacturing. European firms have already invested over $117 billion in India since 2000. If concluded, this deal would do more than boost exports. It would anchor India firmly into global value chains, signal policy credibility, and strengthen India's position in a fragmented global economy. In an era of trade wars and uncertainty, the so-called mother of all deals could become one of India's most strategic economic moves in decades.